Gentlemen, listen closely, because this moment may explain more about your relationship than months of thinking ever did. There is a very specific kind of doubt that does not shout, it softly whispers. It appears late at night after you replay a conversation for the fourth time, after you notice you were generous again, patient again, understanding again, and you catch yourself thinking, am I being used, or am I just overthinking this? That single question alone tells me something important about you. Men who ask that question are not weak, they are aware. They sense patterns before they can explain them. But here is the uncomfortable truth most men never hear stated clearly. If you are constantly wondering whether she is using you, it is usually because something already doesn't add up. And today, we are not here to shame you for that. We're here to give you real clarity. Because getting burned by a woman does not just hurt emotionally, it quietly takes away something far more valuable: time, energy, focus. Time you could have invested in someone who actually chooses you without hesitation, without confusion, without conditions. So if you have ever felt that small imbalance, that quiet sense of being useful instead of desired, stay with me, because by the end of this, you will not just recognize the signs, you will recognize yourself inside them. And just as important, we will also cover the one sign men often misread, the one that causes them to walk away from women who might actually be interested. But first, we start with the pattern that traps more men than any other. Number 10, she's a payday, regular. Here's a truth that sounds simple, but hits hard once you see it. Sometimes a girl has just got to eat, and if there's a woman in your life who never quite commits to spending time with you until suddenly every couple of weeks right before payday, her schedule suddenly clears, that's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Men who pride themselves on being dependable, men who lead with generosity, men who naturally offer to cover the bill without being asked, they are especially vulnerable to this, because she has learned something about you. She knows you're chivalrous. She knows you won't make it awkward. She knows you won't say no. And so you become easy to predict. Notice how it never feels malicious at first. It feels circumstantial, temporary, logical. That's why it works. This is one of the quiet reasons the so-called nice guy ends up finishing last. Not because kindness is wrong, but because kindness without boundaries turns into access. If you are only invited into her life when resources are needed, but never when presence is required, then you are not being chosen, you're being scheduled. And once you see that pattern clearly, not emotionally, but structurally, the confusion fades. If you find yourself stuck in this cycle, this is not about fixing it, it's about exiting it. Because men who notice patterns instead of making excuses do not argue with reality. And this is just the first sign. In the next part, we will look at what it means when she will spend time around you, but never alone with you, and why that distinction changes everything. Stop here. There is a difference most men feel but do not immediately name. It's the difference between being included and being chosen.
Now, men who lack clear direction panic here. They send long messages, explanations, closure speeches. Men who understand human psychology do something very different. They leave cleanly, because chasing someone who is fading is not persistence, it is self-erasure. Here's the key distinction most men miss. Ghosting is not about cruelty, it is about avoidance. She does not want confrontation, she does not want explanation, and she definitely does not want responsibility for how you feel. So she disappears just enough that you question yourself instead of her behavior. That is why your final message, if there is one, should always be calm, polite, and open-ended. Not because she deserves it, but because you do. It preserves your identity, your self-respect, your leverage, just in case reality intervened and she truly could not respond. But make no mistake, men who notice patterns instead of clinging to hope do not wait around for ghosts. They move forward without resentment and without confusion, because clarity does not require closure. And this brings us to the next sign, the one that shows up before she disappears completely. It happens while she is still talking to you, still laughing, still replying, but something important never quite connects. In the next part, we'll talk about what it means when you flirt and she quietly changes the subject. This next sign is where many men get stuck the longest, because on the surface, nothing is wrong. She is still there, she still responds, she is still friendly, and that's exactly why it's confusing. 7. When you flirt, she diverts play. Close attention to what happens right here. You add a little edge to the conversation, a compliment, a playful line, a subtle signal that says, "I see you as more than a friend." And she does not reject you, she does something quieter. She redirects. Maybe she suddenly mentions another guy, not aggressively, almost casually. Maybe she pivots to work, weather, something neutral, safe. And you're left wondering if you misfired. Men who doubt themselves assume they messed up the delivery. Men who understand psychology look at the response. Because flirting is not about words, it's about permission. When attraction is present, flirtation is welcomed, even if it's awkward. When it's not, flirtation is deflected. Here's the part most men do not want to accept. If every attempt to add romantic tension gets neutralized, it's not because you're doing it wrong, it's because she doesn't want it done at all. And notice how clean the avoidance is. No confrontation, no discomfort, no need for her to say, "I'm not interested." She just steers the interaction back to a zone where nothing is expected of her. That's not mixed signals, that's controlled distance. Men who notice patterns instead of forcing chemistry eventually see this for what it is. You are allowed to be present, you are allowed to give attention, you are even allowed to provide emotional warmth, but you are not allowed to move closer. And the moment you recognize that boundary, the question, "Is she using me?" answers itself, because attraction does not require negotiation, it responds.
In the next part, we're going to talk about a sign that feels even more obvious, but is often ignored because it shows up disguised as need, when she only reaches out at very specific moments. There is a type of message that hits differently the moment you see it, not because of what it says, but because of when it arrives. 6. She only calls when she needs something. Think back for a moment. When was the last time she reached out first? Not to vent, not to ask a favor, not because something went wrong, just to connect freely. If you have to dig through your memory for that moment, this sign is already active. Men who understand social dynamics notice this pattern early. She goes quiet. Days pass, sometimes weeks, then suddenly a text, an emergency, a problem, a situation she cannot solve on her own, and you show up because you are capable, reliable, calm under pressure. And that feels good at first until you realize something uncomfortable. You are not on her mind when life is smooth. You're on her mind when life is inconvenient. That is not attraction, that is utility. Here's the reframe most men never make. When someone values you emotionally, they share their highs with you. When someone uses you functionally, they only share their lows. Ask yourself this, and do not answer it out loud. When things are going well for her, where are you? Because do you know who else she reaches out to in a bind? Family, old contacts, people she trusts but does not desire. That's why this lands so heavy. You have not been placed in a romantic category, you've been assigned a role: support, backup, emergency contact. And men who stay in that role too long don't realize it quietly reshapes how they're seen, not as a man she's drawn to, but as someone who is always available. And availability without boundaries does not build attraction, it slowly dissolves it. Before we move on, remember this. At the end of this list, there's one sign men consistently misread, one behavior that looks like disinterest, but often is not. Hold that thought, because next we're going to talk about something even more instinctive, something she does or does not do without thinking. In the next part, we'll look at what her body language reveals when she truly does not care how she looks around you. There are things people can fake: words, excuses, interest temporarily,
but the body is much harder to lie through. 5. Messy hair, just don't care. This one does not require analysis, it requires observation. When a woman is genuinely into a man, something subtle happens. She adjusts, not dramatically, not consciously. A quick touch to her hair, a straightening of her clothes, a small recalibration of how she presents herself. It's automatic. We've said this before because it matters. Attraction activates self-awareness. Now, this is important. These body language cues do not guarantee attraction when they appear, but their absence tells a very clear story. If you spend time with her and she never bothers to adjust her appearance, never checks herself, never seems concerned with how she looks around you, she's not thinking about how she's being perceived. And that means she's not trying to impress you. Men who notice patterns instead of clinging to hope do not argue with this. They don't say, she's just comfortable with me. They don't romanticize indifference. Because comfort without attraction is how people treat roommates, coworkers, safe company, not someone they want. And again, this is not cruel, it's subconscious. She's relaxed because there's nothing at stake. And once you recognize that, the confusion lifts, because attraction creates tension, awareness, effort. When none of that is present, it doesn't mean you're unworthy.
And that difference shows up very clearly in the next sign. 9. She will not commit to hanging alone. Let us slow this down because this one is subtle, and that is why it is dangerous. You suggest grabbing coffee. She says, that could be fun, then quickly adds, I think a few friends are going too. You invite her out, she smiles, then changes it into a group thing. Over time, you start to notice something odd. You are always there, but you are never with her. Now, here is where men talk themselves out of what is real. They say, she is just cautious. She wants to take things slow. Maybe this is just the beginning stage. And yes, early on, group hangs are normal. But men who understand human behavior know something else. Time exposes intent. If weeks pass, if attempts to spend time one-on-one quietly get redirected, if you are consistently placed into social safety zones, that is not shyness. That is distance carefully controlled. Because one-on-one time creates intimacy, and intimacy forces clarity. When a woman avoids that clarity, it is often because she already knows the answer and does not want to say it out loud. So instead, she keeps you nearby, comfortable, non-threatening. You are present enough to provide attention, absent enough to avoid expectation. And that is why this feels so frustrating. You are not rejected, you are contained. Men who notice patterns, instead of chasing reassurance, feel this as a constant low tension, like something never quite progresses, no matter how patient they are. And patience in this situation does not earn attraction, it just extends uncertainty. If you have been orbiting group hangs long past what feels natural, if intimacy is always deferred but never denied outright, that is not chemistry waiting to happen. That is a stall. And stalls do not resolve themselves. They keep you exactly where you are. In the next part, we'll talk about what happens when she doesn't even bother stalling anymore, when presence fades, responses thin out, and confusion quietly turns into absence, because there's a difference between being busy and slowly disappearing. There's a phase most men recognize instantly, even if they don't want to admit it. The energy changes, not abruptly, not dramatically, it just fades away. 8. She slowly fades into Casper, the unfriendly ghost. Men who pay attention do not miss this. They feel it. Replies take longer, messages get shorter, plans become vague, then hypothetical, then vanish completely. And you start asking yourself a dangerous question. Am I imagining this? Here's the rule that cuts through the noise. It's the same rule you learned back when life was simple, when girls had cooties and the ice cream truck mattered more than dating strategy. 3 strikes and you're out. Not emotionally, not dramatically, but structurally.
If you have reached out to her 3 times in a row and received no response, not busy, not later, not even a weak acknowledgement, silence, that is not mystery, that is an answer.
It means you are being kept around for reasons that have nothing to do with desire. In the next part, we move from the body to attention, because nothing exposes interest or lack of it faster than where someone's focus actually goes. Attention is currency, and people spend it exactly where they value something. 4. She does not listen. When a woman is genuinely interested in you, she does not just hear you, she stores you. Details, stories, patterns. Not because she is trying to, but because interest sharpens memory. So if you are sitting across from a woman who cannot put her phone down long enough to follow a single thought, if your words disappear into scrolling silence, if you finish a sentence and realize she never actually showed up for it, that is not distraction, that is disengagement. Men who excuse this behavior tell themselves she is busy, overstimulated, just tired. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People do not multitask through what matters to them. They might not hang on every word, but they stay present. When she does not, it signals something very clear. You are filling space, not creating meaning. And again, this is not about villainizing her, it's about recognizing mismatched intent. You are showing up to connect, she is showing up to pass the time. And men who ignore that mismatch slowly shrink themselves. Talk less, ask more, accommodate endlessly until the relationship becomes lopsided without ever being labeled one. Which leads directly to the next sign, because when attention fades, effort follows. In the next part, we will talk about what happens when conversations become one-way streets, where you are always driving and she's just along for the ride. There's a moment every man experiences, usually too late. It's when he realizes he's been carrying the entire interaction. 3. Caution. One way. If you've ever driven the wrong way down a one-way street, you know the feeling. Something is off. Then suddenly, it's undeniable. Relationships do not come with flashing warning signs like that, but the signal is still there. You just have to notice who's doing the work. Ask yourself this carefully. Are you the one asking the questions, keeping the conversation alive, following up when it goes quiet? Or does she sit back, comfortable, waiting for you to pull another topic out of thin air? Short replies, uninspired texts, minimal curiosity about your life. This is not introversion, it's imbalance. Men who notice patterns instead of forcing connection feel this as exhaustion, not dramatic exhaustion, a quiet one. The sense that if you stopped trying, everything would collapse, and that's your answer. Because mutual interest creates momentum on both sides. When it's one way, you're not building something together, you're performing. And the hardest truth here is this. If she wanted to know you, you would not have to work this hard to be known. Your instincts already picked this up. That's why something feels off. Men who trust that instinct don't argue with it. They don't try harder, they step back. And what happens next tells them everything. In the next part, we're going to address something men often ignore until it's too late. Not behavior, not words, reputation. Because patterns don't start with you. This next one is uncomfortable because it doesn't come from her, it comes from everyone else. 2. She has a reputation. When you meet a woman you're drawn to, something predictable happens. Your focus narrows, not because you're foolish, but because attraction temporarily softens skepticism. You notice her energy, her presence, the way she makes you feel when things are good. And in that state, red flags don't disappear, they just get reframed. They do not really know her like I do. She is misunderstood. That was the old version of her. Men who operate on emotion alone stop here. Men who notice patterns listen to what comes next. Because the people around you, friends, coworkers, people who have known her longer, they do not have tunnel vision. They do not gain anything by warning you. So when multiple independent sources tell you the same thing, that she is trouble, that she uses people, that this story ends the same way every time, that is not gossip. That is information. And here's the line most men do not want to cross mentally. If she has a reputation, it was not built overnight. Reputations are just repeated behavior observed by different people across time. Which means this is not about whether she would do it to you. She already has. She is experienced. And that is why it feels so effortless on her side and so confusing on yours. Men who finally accept this do not feel angry. They feel clear-headed. Because once you understand that patterns existed long before you entered the picture, you stop taking everything personally. And that clarity prepares you for the final sign, the one that ties everything together, the one men resist the most because it removes the last excuse. In the next and final part, we will talk about time, not urgency, not patience, but what time has already told you, if you are willing to listen. There's a phrase people repeat because it is true, even when it's uncomfortable. Only time will tell. And time has been telling you something for a while now. 1. Time has told. In the early stages of connection, uncertainty is normal. Attraction does not always arrive fully formed. People hesitate. They feel things out. That's human. And sometimes patience is the correct move. But here's the distinction. Men with clarity understand patience has an endpoint. If you and her have spent countless hours together, if months have passed, if the dynamic between you is just as stagnant as it was in the beginning, time has already answered the question. Not emotionally, structurally, because attraction either deepens or it does not. And when it does not, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop pretending the future will fix what the present refuses to change. This is the moment most men avoid, the moment where you calmly ask, what does this mean to you? Not as a demand, not as a plea, as a point of clarity. And maybe, honestly, she sees you as a friend. That does not make her evil and it does not make you foolish. It just means the roles do not match. Friendship is only healthy when desire is not quietly poisoning it. But if time has passed and you have noticed several of the signs we have discussed, then the truth is already settled. She is not undecided, she is comfortable. And comfort without commitment is how people keep benefits without taking responsibility. Letting go is not rejection, it's alignment. The most commonly misread sign, impatience. Now this matters because clarity cuts both ways. Dating is not neat. People are busy, work is demanding, life intrudes, especially in a world ruled by text messages and social media. One unanswered message does not mean disinterest. Silence does not automatically mean avoidance. Men who mistake delay for dismissal sabotage themselves. That's why the rule still stands. 3 strikes, not 1, not panic, not projection. Give her time to surface from her life. Give space for reality to intervene, then decide. Because emotional clarity is not reactionary, it's measured. Here's where we end, not with advice, but with identity. Men who see these patterns do not become bitter, they become precise. They stop chasing confusion. They stop negotiating attraction. They stop trying to earn what should be given freely. Once you understand this, you don't move faster, you move cleaner. And that changes everything. Before you leave, comment below and share your honest thoughts or experiences with these signs in a relationship. Thanks for watching the video till the end. And if this brought you clarity, subscribe, like, and share this video so more people can learn to see patterns instead of confusion.